members of the Democratic National Committee there. We'll have more on that issue in a moment. Joe Biden and the call by some for him to step aside from the race to be re-elected as America's president. But first to the Middle East, where the Israeli military has dropped leaflets over Gaza City, telling all residents to evacuate and head towards the center of the territory. There are estimated to be more than 250,000 people still living there, and the message is that Gaza City remains a dangerous fighting zone. Talks to bring about a ceasefire in Gaza and to release more of the Israeli hostages seized on October the 7th have resumed in Qatar today. Hamas appears to have dropped a long-standing demand that Israel commit to a permanent ceasefire before the process begins. But the group says that ongoing Israeli military operations are undermining any deal. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who is under pressure from the families of the hostages to bring their loved ones home, insists the war won't end until Hamas has been destroyed. Correspondents say opponents and increasingly some senior figures in the Israeli military believe that is an impossible aim. The White House says that while gaps remain in these private negotiations, there is hope an agreement can eventually be reached. Well, from all these stories, let's cross live now to Tel Aviv and speak with Arise special correspondent Carl Bostic. Good to see you, Carl. And let's start with your home country, the United States, and what's going on within the Democratic Party there. Has some sort of consensus been reached on President Biden's political future?
Not at all, Charles. When you talk about it being my home country, yes, I'm here in the Middle East, but I'm very worried and concerned about what's going on because, quite frankly, just to kind of read the analysis that's going right now, and I'm watching the reports as well, is that basically it's still a wait and see mode of whether or not the dam can hold or not. I mean, for example, you talk about Nancy Pelosi's comments. You know, she's the most senior person in the House, one of the most respected people in both houses. She's 84 years old, Charles, also. She did not really come out with a throaty, enthusiastic support, saying it's up for him to decide, and I encourage him to do it soon because we're running short on time, even though he's claiming that he's already made up his mind to stay in the race. So there you have really a way of saying that, you know, she's giving him time, but she's also giving fellow House members space to perhaps, you know, hold back from publicly criticizing him, because that's what could happen next. You also mentioned George Clooney, for example. George Clooney is important because, okay, yes, he's a famous Hollywood actor, but he held a fundraiser for Joe Biden just only a few weeks ago, in which the president attended. And what he said in so many words is that I've known Biden for a long time, I admired him, I'm a good friend of him, but the Joe Biden I saw at this event a few weeks ago in Hollywood is the same Joe Biden I saw at the debate. He should not be our next president. We will lose the election with him. You also have, for example, a New York congressman. His name is Pat Ryan. He's come out saying that he must step aside because he will lose New York. And this is important, Charles. New York has always been historically a Democratic state. Democrats outnumber Republicans 2-1. For the first time, it could become a battleground state. That's just hard to believe. Then finally, as far as polls go, national polls go, the last time a Democratic contender was, you know, trailing the Republican nominee was 2000, when George W. Bush led Al Gore by a significant number. Ever since then, from 2004 to 2016, the Democrats were at least 1 to 6 points ahead, and they won those elections. Joe Biden, instead, in 2020, he was 10 points ahead of Donald Trump, and now he's 2 points behind. So that's why there's a lot of nervousness, because not only could the Democrats lose the White House, they could lose the Senate, and they could dash their hopes of taking the House. And that's why a lot of people are watching tomorrow, Charles. After the NATO summit ends, we will see his first news conference in about a year and a half after the NATO summit in Washington. And people are saying that Joe Biden needs to show political proof of life. that he can go out there for unscripted moments.
Well, clearly the stakes are enormously high there, Carl. But I mean, are there people who are looking beyond that sort of horrible debate performance and saying that since then Mr. Biden has shown that he's up to the job? I mean, he's been campaigning all across the country and has been showing himself to be a good president and a global leader.
Well, that's why this week has been so crucial, Charles. And you featured one of the comments from one of the congressmen defending him, who's a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, and that's the firewall that I've spoken about, Charles. His base are union workers in America, the blue collar, middle class labor workers, but also the black voters. The Congressional Black Caucus, Charles, has 60 members in Congress. They're considered to be the soul of Congress. They've come out unequivocally, publicly, in defense of Joe Biden because of his commitment to policies that favor people from middle income levels and lower income levels, and wanting to eradicate poverty, for example. That's why publicly they're saying they're for him. So for all of the dissent against Joe Biden, Charles, is an important point to make. I think I made it the other day. Not one black lawmaker has come out against Joe Biden. When that happens, publicly, that'll be a telltale sign. If Nancy Pelosi comes out, speaking against him, that'll be another telltale sign. Charles, it's day to day to day. To be truthful, I think we'll know a lot more after tomorrow's press conference about how well he's able to campaign. As the chairman of the Democrats in Congress, Congressman Aguilar from California put it, he needs to show that he can campaign, that he's giving press conferences, he's not using teleprompters, that he's showing he's able to do it. One final thing, Charles, is this. George Stephanopoulos, who did the interview, who interviewed Joe Biden for ABC, he was caught on the street unawares by a passerby who asked him very quickly, do you think he can win? And he wasn't really aware that he's being filmed. And George Stephanopoulos said, I don't think he can even last 4 years.
Yeah, that's quite extraordinary. And as you said, Carl, that NATO summit, President Biden under intense scrutiny, and we'll see whether that will seal his political fate. But let's move on to the Middle East where you are. Before we get to the latest ceasefire talks, we understand the Israeli army has dropped leaflets on Gaza City urging residents to evacuate. It's the second time they've been told to leave the area and head to safe zones. What's the latest that you can tell us about this evacuation order? Because it sounds like another major Israeli military operation is imminent.
That's right, Charles. You need to keep in mind that this war now has gone on, or you could even say it dragged on for now 9 months. I mean, it's the longest war in Israel's history, almost since, except for the War of Independence in 1948. Very simply put, it's this, Charles. The chances for a ceasefire deal, they're maybe about as good as it can get, because you have negotiators in Doha, Qatar, as you mentioned, Charles, and you also have them meeting in Cairo. One of the demands amongst many, Charles, that are non-negotiable, says Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister here, is that they want to make sure that the remaining Hamas fighters, who are now basically in the south, Charles, cannot return to the north to resume operations against Israel. They are carrying out this intensive operation, Charles, because if a ceasefire deal is announced, then they have to basically, stop attacking. So this is a last major effort to again root out tunnels and seek out fighters before a ceasefire, which would be imminent, because then you're looking at a 6-week deal, and then a negotiation for another 6 weeks. And finally, Charles, I'll add this. Benjamin Netanyahu, he's still scheduled to come to Washington, D.C., July 24th. It's the worst possible time for him to come to Washington, because you've got a national political crisis ongoing in the U.S. And then, people here in Israel, Charles, where I am, are saying that he has no business going to Washington if he hasn't done a ceasefire deal, if he hasn't returned hostages, and you now have the threat of war even increasing more so in the north.
Very, very interesting. Carl, thank you ever so much. Carl Bostic is our special correspondent. He was talking to me there on the line from Tel Aviv.